Hi ho, kiddos. So, what we're going to be talking about right now is something that is really particularly relevant for all of you, whether you know it or not. And we're going to start by talking a little bit about the background on this. And what we're going to address is the development of the modern American banking and financial systems. And despite the fact that the way that I have this written, we're going to kind of tackle this in reverse order. Now, one of the things that I'm going to go as to start back with, we had three presidents in a row who are generally regarded as the progressive presidents. You had Roosevelt, who obviously we looked at a lot of progressive stuff that he did in terms of conservation efforts and cleaning up food and medicine and getting really involved in other people's business and affairs and really um, selling the idea of being much more active and involved. You got Wilson, who, um, aside from, the rather awkward connection with the Ku Klux Klan and the fact that he's a, flaming bigot, is incredibly progressive in his thoughts, especially in his desire to expand the power of government and to put pretty much every part of life into the government. Now, notice I skipped over somebody, and that's Taft. Because of the three of them, it's easy to step back and look and go, well, Taft's really not a progressive. Well, in some ways, maybe he wasn't, but in some respects, he's incredibly progressive. And we have to talk about Taft in order to talk about what we're going to be bringing up. We're going to be talking about the Federal Reserve System, commonly referred to as the Fed, and the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. And we're going to talk about what each of these are and what they do. And it's a little backwards, but I'm actually going to start with the IRS and move our way. In 1913, shortly after being elected, Woodrow Wilson signed into law the Revenue Act of 1913. The Revenue Act of 1913 was designed to create a new way for the government to generate income for itself. That's what revenue is, it's income. The first thing was the Revenue Act of 1913 established the Underwood Tariff, and it lowered tariff rates. Now, if you remember, you have basically two different kinds of tariffs. You have protective tariffs, which are really high tariff rates in order to promote U.S. business, and you have revenue tariffs, which are generally low, and their idea is to make money for the government. Now, the problem with the Underwood tariff is, if you guys remember way back to last unit, there was the McKinley tariff, which was the highest tariff ever passed in U.S. history. Well, even though McKinley himself had authored it, during McKinley's administration and then followed by Roosevelt and Taft, these tariffs had gradually been reduced to the point that they were strict revenue tariffs. They were low, but they generated quite a bit of income for the government. And up until 1913, the government's main form of revenue for itself was through tariffs, which are, remember, taxes on imported goods. Wilson lowers the tariff rate even further. So I think this is pretty straightforward, but just to make sure this is clear, when you lower the tariff rates, you are lowering the amount of money that you are bringing in. And if tariff rates are already low because all they're trying to do is bring in some revenue and you're trying to encourage foreign countries to sell stuff, lowering them further, yes, it will encourage maybe more foreign countries to sell, But at some point in time, there's only so much that can be sold and bought. What you are doing, however, is lowering the amount of income that the government is getting. What do you do to make up for this? And this is really where the Revenue Act comes in. The Revenue Act of 1913 proposed a constitutional amendment. This becomes the 16th Amendment, by the way. One of the, I honestly go back and forth as to whether it's the 16th, 17th, or 18th Amendments that are the worst ones ever put in the Constitution. And we'll talk about each of them at some point. The 16th Amendment allows for the legalization of a graduated income tax. Now, what a graduated income tax is, it does not mean it's a tax that went to school and got a diploma. It is a tax that is based on certain like levels or tiers. So the more money that you make, the more of a percentage that you pay. The opposite of this is what's called a flat tax. That's where you say, like, there's a 5% tax. So that means that out of every dollar you make, 5 cents automatically goes out for tax. Now, if you just think about this logically, with a flat tax, the more money you make, the more money you're going to pay. If you make $50,000 a year at 5% tax, you are going to pay $2,500 in taxes. If you make $500,000 a year, you are going to pay $25,000 in taxes. You still are going to pay more taxes. But progressives do not like flat tax. And this is the reason why. The view of the true progressive is that, yes, it is true that the wealthy will be paying more because logically math dictates 5% of 100 is greater than 5% of 50. What progressives do not like is that lower income people can less afford to lose their 5%, let's say, than a middle class or wealthy person can afford to lose 5%. If you have $100 in your pocket and somebody takes away 5, you've got $95 left. If you have $1,000 in your pocket and somebody takes away 50, you've got 950 left. One of you is better off than the other. Now, of course, this is just logical, but this is the problem with true leftist progressivism. It does not like logical inequality. What it wants is equity, not equality. So in order to make things equitable, the idea was floated to create a graduated, or as the Constitution would call it, apportioned income tax. That is, that the more money you make, the more your tax rate becomes. Now, to understand how things have changed, the 16th Amendment allows legally for the income tax. The first president to institute the income tax, by the way, was Abraham Lincoln, and it was struck down as unconstitutional. Originally, only about 5 to 7% of the entire country paid income tax. Only people making like over $500,000 a year actually got charged income tax. Within 10 years, the income tax becomes the main source of money for the government. At its heart, what the income tax's idea was, and what Wilson wanted, and what the supporters of the income tax wanted, was this. Let me see if I can, I don't know where my pointer went to. I don't even know if I got a pointer. A laser pointer. They wanted wealth equity. So what that essentially was is that the income tax allows the government to take money away from the wealthy and use it for the benefit of everybody else. You create equity by taking away from one group and sharing it with everybody else. The Revenue Act of 1913 also established the Federal Reserve under something known as the Federal Reserve Act. Now, going back to the income tax business, the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, has as its job only to collect money. It does not spend the money. It does not set the tax rates. It does not distribute the money. It only collects it. That's all that its job is. Initially, the income tax was designed that wealthy Americans would have to pay and support everybody. That has gradually gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, I've posted a video on the Internal Revenue Service that I would like you to watch, and the income tax, and it'll explain some stuff. Make sure you watch that. Make sure you copy down the rest of these notes. I'm going to pick up this on part 2 of this lesson with the next Lessoncast, okay? But the big takeaways from this: the Revenue Act of 1913 lowered tariff rates, which caused a loss of money, which would be made up for by the proposed 16th Amendment, which created a graduated income tax. A graduated income tax is one where the more money that you make, the higher the percentage you pay is. Within 10 years, the income tax had become the main source of the government's money. And the real idea behind income tax was to make things equitable for everybody. Peace and love.